So, we won. Kind of. Not really. Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot boxes. Now this has been an ongoing topic of discussion for me, and kind of in a weird way because, you know, I've never been a really huge fan even of the Star Wars Battlefront games, but it's kind of part of DICE's thing, and it's part of stuff with EA, and you guys know that I've played a lot of their games previously, so it does kind of tie in there. The other thing being, this is a wider issue, as I've said recently. This is a bigger issue than just EA. It's a bigger issue for their games next year with the next Battlefield coming up. It's a bigger issue because we see companies like Take-Two saying that they want to basically implement it in all games, including Red Dead Redemption 2 coming up as well. And, you know, it's just a wider industry source of implementation for extra monetization that they're continuing to kind of push. Now, in the very early hours of this morning, the Star Wars Battlefront Twitter account posted this out, saying that in-game purchases for Star Wars Battlefront 2 were going to be turned off for the launch. And it says, as we approach the worldwide launch, it's clear many of you feel there are still challenges in the design. We've heard the concerns about potentially giving players unfair advantages, and we've heard that this is overshadowing an otherwise great game. They say, this was never our intention, sorry we didn't get this right. They say, we hear you loud and clear, we're turning off all in-game purchases. We'll now spend more time to listen, adjust, balance and tune. This means that the option to purchase crystals in the gameplay is going to be offline. All progression will be earned through gameplay. The ability to purchase crystals in-game will become available at a later date. Not might become available, but will become available. Only after, though, we've made changes to the game. We'll share more details as we work through this. That's from Oscar Gabrielson, General Manager at DICE. And the next question is, how sincerely do you take this statement? And for my part, there's three perspectives where you can go down on this. The first being quite objective and saying, well look, there was a massive amount of outcry, discussion and general outrage, I would say, at the way that this system was implemented. To all the people who were going, oh, it's not such a bad deal and it doesn't really affect me in game. Well, you were clearly wrong, because even the company themselves are saying they got it wrong. So maybe all of you guys who were like, you know, propping them up and giving them a pass, maybe you want to backtrack a little and actually say, hey, you know, actually this was a bad thing and we should have called it out stronger. But enough people did call it out and enough people were pissed off about it that they have decided to take at least some action. Now, whether or not they decide to retract that or kind of roll back at a later date and still, you know, as they've already said, that they are going to, not they might, but will become available at a later date. So it's going to come back in, but just not for release. And as I say, you know, this is the objective point of view that I'm thinking about here. The fact that they are addressing it at all, the fact that they are saying that they got it wrong, the fact that they're actually taking an effort to make some change, the fact that they're shutting it down at release in the very early period, which is what most people were complaining about, this idea that in the very early game, before you'd actually had a chance to earn any of the equipment or unlock anything, that's the period where you're going to probably get screwed over the most and it could turn off new players, etc. The fact that they're even taking any action on it at all there at that time, that's a really big deal. It is a big deal for a big company like this to come out right before release and say, we screwed this up, we're turning it off. That's a big deal, and you should give them some credit for doing that. However, two other points of view. And the first is going to be like the DICE fanboy in me. Okay, so the DICE fanboy who loves Battlefield, loves Battlefront, loves all these guys, you know, maybe the kind of people where your entire Twitter account is focused around this kind of stuff, and, you know, maybe your whole YouTube channel is focused all around this kind of stuff, Battlefield, Star Wars Battlefront, all this kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, the DICE fanboy in me is going to be going like, we said that this might imbalance the game or give unfair advantages, that it overshadowed an otherwise great game, as they stated right here. And it's like, yeah, so you can say that that side of you is going to be like leaping for joy and going like, oh my god, look, this proves what I've thought all along. They're totally listening to the community. They're listening to what we want. They're making some changes. They're going to be on board with it. This is absolutely the perfect thing, and it only kind of reaffirms my belief in the company, that they do what they say, that they're going to listen to us, etc, etc. Now that's the kind of DICE fanboy side of things. The problem with that is it's still giving a pass. Like, if you're leaping for joy over this and going like, oh, this is absolutely perfect, they're doing exactly the right things, it's still giving a pass on the fact that it was there in the first place, which is a fundamentally bad thing. You couldn't see it any other way than that this was going to be a bad thing. Like, there's no positive to this system being in the game. So the fact that it was in there at all, the fact that it was even more screwed up in the beta, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And the fact that it even is going to exist at a later date is still a bad thing. So that kind of doesn't really stack up for me. I don't think that there's any real positive that you can take away from it, which is unfortunate. The only positive is that they listened off of the back of a mountain of critical feedback, a mountain of people saying like, this is bullshit, you need to not do this. And that kind of leads me into like my third point. So the third point is the more cynical and arguably more tinfoil hat version of these kind of things, which is, as I always use the phrase, has someone run the numbers here? And this is where you get kind of way more down the rabbit hole. Has someone run the numbers at EA and gone, shit, this whole thing is seriously going to damage the possibility of initial sales? And are they going along the lines of, hey, if we tell everyone that we're going to turn this off and that we're going to change it, that's going to prop up our sales in the initial bit. After that, fuck it, who cares? Because they might be thinking, well, look, we need to put out a positive statement saying like this stuff's going to get turned off, so that it bumps up the sales and we get like a good bit of media coverage about how positive we're having an influence on the game. Game gets released, make a load of sales, and then after that, well, those guys are either going to burn out and just leave the game, or when we re-implement it, which they have stated here is going to happen, crystals in-game will become available at a later date. So it is going to come back in. That they figure, well, hey, because remember how we've had these discussions about generally for microtransaction systems, you tend to be, it's again, it would go back to that South Park parody. It's about finding the heaviest users and exploiting those users. If you're the kind of person who's going to be probably playing the game anyway in that sense, then you're going to get back in on those systems, you're still going to use those systems. The only positive in there is that, as we said, because it's not maybe going to be present in the earlier stages of the game, most people are going to have an opportunity to unlock stuff, so you're still going to have an advantage later down the line, but maybe, you know, not so much. The last thing I'm also going to say is this bit here where it says, we've heard the concerns about potentially giving players unfair advantages. No, not potentially. Definitely giving players unfair advantages. It's been shown. People have unlocked this stuff. They've demonstrated, it's demonstratable. It's demonstratable that you have an unfair advantage over other people. How is having like extra damage, extra turn speed, all this kind of stuff of like a ridiculous degree from getting boxes that you've paid for, how is that not an unfair advantage? It is an unfair advantage. So unless they go back and actually change those systems and stop it, where you can kind of essentially get equipment boosts and equipment upgrades and stuff out of these things, then it's really going to be, you know, you're still going to be getting it wrong, DICE. You know, you need to, the idea of putting in unlocks which boost your abilities, which give you an advantage over other people, making that stuff so that it is purchasable, making the rest of the game a painful grind so that you actually feel incentivized to get that stuff. Unless that is gone, you're still getting it wrong. So that's where we are with these things. So it's a positive thing in the scheme of generally when you get these kind of things come out, microtransaction systems and all this kind of stuff, and the darker road that we're going down, when you have these things coming out, most of the time these companies, especially EA, don't move on this at all. They don't make any admission even that they got things wrong. And that's why, as positive as this is, I find it kind of weird. Like, I didn't expect this. This is mind-blowing. So the very fact that they're coming out with this makes me super concerned almost that they're not really planning to change that much. We'll wait and see. Time's going to tell. Prove me wrong, DICE. Prove me wrong. That's what I would say. Show that you are actually listening. In fact, if anything, this is going to be... They have backed themselves into a corner here. Because if they make this statement saying that they didn't get it wrong, and that they want to make changes, they want to balance and tune it, and then they don't do that, this will then be like a precedent. It'll be like something that you can refer back to and say, well, look, they said this, and then they didn't do it. So prove us wrong, DICE. Make your changes and make it so that the game doesn't have star cards which basically fundamentally alter the benefits that a player has so that it gives them an advantage over others. Make those changes and then we'll talk about having a positive influence on the game and listening to the community. But until then, I will personally consider this a marketing perspective where someone has decided, hey, we need to like pour some water on the fire here or we're going to be in trouble when the game gets released. So let's see how this one pans out. Am I being way too cynical about this, guys? Or am I just pissed off that, you know, this whole nonsense has been going on and on and on, and it's gotten to this point? You guys tell me down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.